Jasmine Sadri. This is Harriet Kelly Gibby's show, but we're going to do something a little different today so you have a chance to really get to know Harriet and learn what to expect from groundbreaking vision with Harriet. Hello, Harriet.
Hi, Jasmine. Thank you for doing
this.
this.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. So let's start with just the basics.
Okay.
What inspired you to produce a video blog called Groundbreaking Vision?
Well, I have been involved in entertainment my whole life. I started acting and modeling at a very, very early age. And because of the life I grew up in, my parents' business, when I was born, my dad was a Methodist minister. So I grew up in a family that talked about how to create community, how to forward the goals of the community as a whole. And it affected me in a very powerful way because it's all I knew. I was sitting in my mother's lap in the pew in church and watching him preach and thinking, oh, this is something that you do.
Yeah,
this is how
normal.
You create. Yeah. So, and then eventually my parents left the ministry and they went into the civil rights program under the LBJ administration and the Kennedy administration. So I was around for some very groundbreaking moments in American history. And,
oh my gosh, yeah.
So they were leaders in the civil rights movement in Houston. My dad helped. He was one of the architects that wrote the Head Start program in Houston with Sergeant Shriver, who was President Kennedy's brother-in-law.
Yep.
And Maria Shriver's
Maria's
father.
That's right.
So I grew up with this kind of activity going on in my house. Again, how are we going to create equality? How are we going to create people that are connected? It was really about creating joy and happiness and health. I don't think we called it that at the time. They were talking about creating community and creating a world that worked for everyone. That was definitely a topic of the 60s and 70s activism.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's kind of what I grew up with, and always looking for a new way to tell that message, a new way to deliver that kind of change and transformation.
Which is interesting because taking into account just how the atmosphere and the environment politically, socially of those decades, I mean, that was what your family did was pretty ahead of its time.
It was, and I didn't know it at the time, but as I look back on I realized, for instance, when I moved to Dallas in the 80s, that Houston was a very different town because there was a war on poverty and a civil rights movement in Houston that changed the way Houston looked and felt. And when I came to Dallas, I noticed, hey, I had a different kind of an upbringing. I was raised in a different kind of cultural environment, and it made me notice, that you can create change and transformation in the things that you do, in the choices that you make, in the way that you live your life. So those were some of the earliest childhood influences that made me think I've always been attracted to things that were creating change and transformation for people. So that's become a lifelong theme.
My goodness, and you've been able to parlay this underlying just way of thinking and living into everything else you've done. Let's go through your resume here. When did you sleep? That's what I want to know.
Well, it's amazing what you can do when you're inspired. And really, for most of my life, because of the family I grew up in, being inspired by what I did was just something that was a given for me. If it didn't inspire me, I didn't do it. I wasn't attracted to it. Let's put it. I mean, I did have jobs that didn't inspire me. Of course, everybody has their awful jobs that they have in college and whatever.
You just don't tell the boss that.
Yeah. So I had those jobs, but there was a distinctive quality of life that I grew up in, that people did jobs that inspired them. People did jobs that created change and transformation and sort of moved the culture and the community forward. So one of the earliest things I did on my own, not because of the family I grew up in, but I started taking acting lessons and became a member of an acting company in Houston at a very early age, about 8, 9 years old. And was hooked because the minute I heard someone laugh about something that I had said, I was like, okay, this is for me.
I have an audience.
I'm going to do this. I'm affecting change. I'm creating happiness. I want to keep doing this. So I had a career acting and modeling at a very, very early age. And I noticed in all of my acting experiences that if I had trouble finding the character, even as a young person, there was that talk about finding your character.
Sure.
So if I ever had trouble finding the character, I would find it as soon as they gave me my costume. So at a very early age, I had a visceral, physical experience of change and transformation when you get the right outfit on, when you get the costume. And
it's
then all
so
of a sudden
metaphorical,
you're there.
all of it, yeah.
Yes. So when I started acting in college at the University of Texas in Austin, I was always the one that was dressing people and getting people ready for our productions, our stage productions and our television productions. So yeah, it's carried throughout my early years.
And there's such a sense of empowerment. That's what I'm seeing. It's just what I feel from what you're telling me. What does power mean to you?
That is such a great question. I think everybody wants power. We want some experience of our power. We want to know we can make a change in our lives. It's just a basic need to find power. So, and we're going through a huge transformation of power right now with the political climate the way it is, with the Me Too movement. The concept of power is changing dramatically.
All groundbreaking, by the way.
All groundbreaking.
Which is why this is Groundbreaking
Yes,
Vision.
it
with
is.
Harriet.
It is.
So you brought up some loose specifics here about sort of, parts of your past. What other moments that you can think of specifically influenced your path here?
Well, there was another groundbreaking moment. So I graduated from the University of Texas in Austin with a degree in radio, television, and film. And I decided to get behind the camera. And so I went to work in the advertising industry, writing and producing for corporate clients. I did a lot of real estate development, commercial development in Houston. Really enjoyed it because there were Houston was going through a huge change at that time, and the downtown skyline was going through an enormous change. It was growing and expanding, and commercial real estate was exploding. And I was lucky that I worked for an agency and a design firm that we wrote, directed, and produced commercials and corporate branding pieces that helped these commercial developers make their mark in Houston. And I won a lot of awards for it, and it became really fun for me. It's like, oh wow, for someone that had grown up acting and modeling, which at that time was not considered a serious profession.
Of course not.
I thought, oh, I've got some chops here. I can write and produce and really make a difference there.
Yeah, parents would have heart attacks when you tell them, I want to be an actress or a producer.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And my parents, they believed in me. They had a hard time really understanding what my natural vision was and my natural calling was, but they did their best to support me along the way. And so I was in Houston working. My then husband and I were wanting to start our own film production company, and because of my commercial development work, I had come to Dallas to cover the groundbreaking of the Dallas Communications Complex, which was Trammell Crow Jr.'s development in Irving. And at the time, there was nothing but ground. It was a groundbreaking, and they said, okay, we're going to be the third coast. This facility is going to turn Dallas into the third coast for filmmaking. So besides New York and Beverly Hills, it was going to be Dallas. So I went home to Houston. I said, we're moving to Dallas, because we got this new facility, we can start our own film production company, and within a few months we were living here in Dallas. And we had started Gibby Productions, which is a film production company that my husband and I started together. And that was a groundbreaking moment, bringing me to Dallas. The transition from being in commercial advertising and writing and producing branding to being back in the film business, as it were. And my fantasy was that we'd get the production company up and running, and I'd go back to acting. So Kim Dawson, another groundbreaking moment.
Yeah.
Kim and I became
fixture
friends.
Here in Dallas, Fort Worth.
Yeah, she's such an amazing woman and has influenced so many people.
Oh
I've
my
been a
gosh.
mentor to
so many.
And she was a female leader. This was a time.
One of the first.
Yes.
That was incredibly groundbreaking.
And that was really important to me, to be
Yeah.
associated with female mentors and female leaders who had successful businesses. There weren't that many that you could look to, and she was one.
Yeah.
She was just amazing. So we sat on a professional board together at the Dallas Communications Complex, and I said, I kind of miss acting and modeling. She said, well, girl, come on down to the agency. We'll get you listed, and you can do some acting. So I said, okay, and took her advice and went down to the agency and got listed, and I made more money modeling, and it was just a complete surprise because at this phase of my life, I'm 27 years old, and most of the girls that I'm modeling with are 19 and 20 years old. So
that's a fun reality, isn't it?
yeah, and Neiman's she sort of introduced me to Neiman's. Neiman's discovered me, and I became the house model for Neiman's and traveled with them for 10 years or so. So that was a groundbreaking series of events. Both that brought me to Dallas, and then the groundbreaking of the Dallas Communications Complex brought me to Dallas, the groundbreaking of us starting our own company, and then the groundbreaking move of being in a runway model with the Kim Dawson Agency at a time that I was really too old to do it.
Age is just a number, right?
But it worked. It was like, what?
Yeah. So aside from Kim Dawson, who was just a massive trailblazer
Yeah.
for that era of Dallas and
Yeah.
Fort Worth. Who were some of your other mentors here in Dallas?
Gosh, I've had so many wonderful mentors that have been instrumental in my career, and Mr. Marcus was one of them. Stanley Marcus was amazing, and he had the most down-to-earth way of dealing with people. And I was in the store for many hours, the downtown Neiman store, and it was really wonderful to get to watch him work with people and respond to people that would come into the store in just this very easygoing manner. So he was another really great mentor.
That was a staple in my household, by the way. We were always at that downtown Neiman's.
At the downtown store. It's
right
not
there off
like
of
the
Main
other
Street.
stores.
No,
it has its
not.
own vibe.
It's not, yeah. Who are some of the other designers you've worked with, though? This is where I love talking fashion.
Well, being at Neiman's in the 80s for 10 years and traveling with them, I had the honor of working with almost every major designer in the world in the 80s and 90s. So Versace, Gianni Versace, Donna Karan. I opened the store for Chanel when they opened their boutique here and modeled for Chanel. Gosh, I produced Chanel fashion shows. Versace, I was doing a show for Versace. Dallas did a huge show with Gianni Versace when he was still alive, and this was just a fun story. So they were auditioning Dallas girls to be in the show. He had a group of girls that he brought with him. There were like 6 girls that traveled with him for the show. And he had Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista and Iman and
all the staples. They were
the
such
big
staples
supermodels.
then, yeah.
And so they were auditioning Dallas girls, and I had auditioned, and they said, go sit over there in the audience. And I sat down next to this young woman who was his sister, and we just had a nice chat. It turned out to be Donatella Versace. She was a delight. She was just a mom, and she was just hanging out with her brother. He had asked her to come along to be with him on the road, and she'd brought her daughter. And so it was this real family moment, and she was, just so casual and easy and just girlfriendy.
Yeah.
And she said, you should travel with us for the line. And I said, well, I just had a
Okay.
baby, and I had experienced traveling at that point enough. I remember being at a hotel room in San Francisco, and I called home, and my son was 2 at the time. And a nanny was reading to him, and I just burst into tears. I thought, I'm down here turning circles in San Francisco, which is fun and everything, and somebody else is reading to my child.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it didn't have the same
That
appeal to
juxtaposition
me.
of
Yeah, so I
everything.
stopped traveling shortly after that, so I could be with my children a little bit more and stayed in Dallas.
Yeah. Did you stay in contact with the Versace family long after that?
I didn't. Things move very, very fast in the fashion industry.
Oh, my
really,
gosh.
really, really fast.
Oh,
So
yeah.
no, I didn't. I wish I had. There were so many people that I wished
Yeah.
I'd stayed in touch with over the years. Some I did, but
Yeah.
I
What are
didn't
some other fun designer stories?
Oh, let's see.
Give us the deets, Harriet.
Trying to remember. Let's see. We did the Chanel was a really big deal, and the Chanel boutique opened here. It was a huge deal to have our own Chanel
sure.
couture store.
Freestanding there in Highland Park.
Yeah, so once I started modeling for them, I started producing all of their fashion shows as well, and that was an amazing experience. I was there when Karl Lagerfeld came on board.
Oh, wow.
So I got to see the transition from the Coco Chanel people to the Karl Lagerfeld team of people that took over the label and has done a great job, just a super job. Let's see, I was in-house producer at Stanley Korshak and worked with Vera Wang.
Another staple here, Stanley Korshak.
Yes, oh my gosh. Yeah, we produced a show together called the Leukemia St. Valentine's Day Fashion and Luncheon. And that show was kind of not doing anything, and Crawford, the owner, Stanley Korshak, picked it up and said, Harriet, will you help me turn this into something that would be really useful to the community and the store? And I said,
Yeah.
sure. So we took it from, I think at the time that we got it, a $70,000 fashion show. In about 9 years, it was $1.5 million fundraising dollars that went to the Leukemia Society, and
That's
helped
incredible.
elevate Korshak into one of the best boutiques in the country in that period of time. And they've continued to grow and be very successful.
My goodness.
As well. So
I love when charity and fashion shake hands and create an event.
And
That's
they
one of
do
my
here.
favorites. Oh, they
They
do.
do
Dallas,
here.
Dallas is all about that.
if we're doing a fashion show, it's almost always 95% of the time attached to a charity, which is a
Absolutely.
way to bring people to your event, because the people associated with the charity will come into your store and go shopping or shop the line, and you build
Absolutely.
affinity
Yes.
through the nonprofit for the designer or the retailer. So it's a great system. And
Yeah.
Yeah, and produced a lot of shows for a lot of retails over the years.
Welcome to Dallas, y'all. That's what we do, charity and fashion. Speaking of, how did you become a fashion show producer after that whole modeling career?
You know, that's an interesting story. I was doing a show for Stanley Korshak in the Anatole, and I was coming down the runway. And in this business, when you've been at it a while, there's this moment where the audience explodes in applause, and it becomes a thing. And that was one of those moments. I was going down the runway, doing this fashion show, second floor in the Anatole, and the audience exploded with applause, and I thought, this is great. I'm really having a good time. And there was a little voice in my head that said, "You're done." And I said, I'm done? It said, "Yeah, you're done." And I thought, no, I really like this job.
Yeah,
this is really fun.
Know.
Yeah, I'm wearing clothes and entertaining people and having a really good time. And the little voice in my head said, "It's been fun, and you can keep doing it. And it'll keep being fun, but you're not going to grow and you're not going to change. So it's time for you to do something else."
That's interesting.
And that's kind of like the day I quit traveling with my children, when I realized this is not for me. I quit traveling in the fashion business because of my children, and so I quit making modeling my primary focus and started producing fashion shows. And I got to use all of that skill and talent that I had as a writer-producer in the advertising industry and bring it to the fashion industry. So at the time that I started producing fashion shows, most of the fashion directors and producers were friends of the designer. So they weren't really trained producers. Mm-hmm. They were great, and they'd grown up in the ranks, and they were friends with the designer, and they needed each other. But in terms of actually producing, scripting, designing a fashion show with video and dancers and all of those things that we could do, that was a great niche for me, and just really enjoyed it, and did all kinds of fashion shows that involved Cirque du Soleil. So we did a huge show for Zales one time for thousands of people. And we hired Cirque du Soleil people. So the Cirque du Soleil people would come out and perform.
Well, that's the real deal.
And the
You're
models would
producing
walk
the real
through the
my
Cirque
goodness.
du Soleil performers performing. And
That
we
is
would entertain
incredible.
1,500 to 2,000 people at a time for days on end for all of the marketing people and the Zales Corporation. And
My goodness.
that was really fun, because we had to make all the costumes for all the dancers. We had a dance troupe. We had Cirque du Soleil performers. And then we got clothes from the different retailers around town. And it was all to model jewelry. Zales.
Which is not a bad gig. So, I mean, we're sitting here talking about this incredible life you've lived, everything you've done, and I can't help but wonder why, after all these years, you still want to do the fashion and entertainment route of all this. Like, why?
It still is fun. And fun is much more important than I think we've given it credibility for in the past. I mean, when I was growing up, you did a job and you got paid for it partly because you hated it. It's like, well, I was there, I worked, and that's what you got paid for because you didn't like it.
Almost a negative stigma.
Yes.
It was associated with
Yes.
guilt. You shouldn't be
Yes.
having fun at
You
your
shouldn't be
job.
having
That
fun at
means
your
you're,
job.
you're goofing off.
Yeah. And one thing, Kim Dawson, I will always be grateful to her, and she would say this to me every time she saw me: "Are you having fun, girl? Girl, are you having fun?" And it changed the way I was thinking, because in the advertising industry, you worked hard, you worked long hours.
You didn't think about fun.
Fun was not the point. If you had fun, and we did, yay, but that was not the point.
Mm-hmm.
And in the fashion industry, if you worked with Kim, you worked your ass off, but you did have fun. She was having fun, and she wanted the girls to have fun. And it changed the way I thought about work. And as I kept producing fashion as a model, it was fun. Every job has its grit.
Sure.
You feel like you're carrying shoe bags everywhere, 30, 40, 50-pound shoe bags when you're modeling everywhere you go.
Of
so you feel
course.
like a pack mule half the time.
Yeah.
And then you show up and be glamorous.
Of course, and you're
it's-
80 pounds and you haven't eaten in a week, so it makes it
Yeah.
even worse.
Yeah. So there's every profession has its downside, but there was a lot of fun. I love the camaraderie with the girls. It's just one of my favorite things. When I was house model at Neiman's, there was a little clique of us that did all the shows at Neiman's, and there was a family.
Yeah.
And that has become increasingly more valuable to me,
For sure.
that it's fun, that you connect with people. You share the joy, you support each other, you build each other up, you
That's
tell
profound,
each other's
isn't
stories.
it?
It is.
You get to a point in your life where things like that are way more profound than they would look superficially.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Wow, that's
Yes.
incredible.
Yeah.
Well, what is your attraction with and history with nonprofit fundraising? We kind of touched a little bit on it, but go into a little bit more of the details of all that.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful to Dallas for my understanding of both the fashion industry and the nonprofit industry. Every fashion show I ever did, whether it was for Neiman's or anybody else, almost always was associated with a nonprofit, as I said earlier. And since I grew up in a family that did a lot of nonprofit kind of work, it was a natural place for me to gravitate to. So when I started producing fashion shows, like when we did the Chanel boutique shows, we worked with the opera. That was their favorite charity. That was Coco's favorite charity, so that was the charity that Chanel aligned with. So it was always for the opera. And Leukemia, the Stanley Korshak show, that was for the Leukemia Society. So I had an affinity for being able to tell the story of a nonprofit. And before every fashion show, I'd always shoot a video, kind of a documentary of what the nonprofit was about, because we had just a few minutes to tell the audience, this is the story, this is the good work that this nonprofit is doing,
Right.
and inspire everybody with their mission so that they could increase their fundraising dollars or increase volunteerism, just raise awareness of the difference they were making in their community. And then I got to where I was just doing a lot of nonprofit work without fashion shows. I created an event for the Center for Nonprofit Management, and they called me, they'd seen one of my fashion shows, and they said, we've never done a nonprofit fundraising event. Will you help us do one like the one we just saw at the Anatole? And I said, sure. So we spent about a year naming it, and we named it the Night of Light because from my research, I discovered that Dallas is one of the most philanthropic cities in the world, and if you lit a candle in the window of every little nonprofit, whether it's Mom and Pop or the Dallas Communities Foundation, you'd light up
Absolutely.
the city. So we named it Night of Light, and it became an Oscar evening for the nonprofit community. So by doing that, by shooting little documentaries of each of the nonprofits that were nominated for any given award, the other nonprofits could see what everybody was doing. So there was an open discussion then about how to pick a good board member, how to pick a good board director, what the leadership looked like, how to raise more money. So it became an educational, entertaining evening, and it's now become really well known.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Salvation Army Women's Auxiliary, I started that fashion show with Kim Dawson when my son again was 2. So that's been since 1987, and it's still done to this day and raises millions of dollars for the Salvation Army.
Wow.
Yeah.
So taking everything you've shared with us today into account, what do you want Groundbreaking Vision with Harriet to do for Dallas?
Oh, I want to share people's stories. People that are making a difference and have a groundbreaking vision. Something that I've noticed is that I just happen to be there so frequently when groundbreaking things are occurring in culture. It's just my life energy. It is a lot of other people's as well. It's just that I really have noticed it, and I love to tell those stories. So we're going to be telling people stories.
That's incredible.
And telling it in a way that the community can understand, get on board, be inspired by the message, and they can find out about it. We can find each other.
Yeah.
And we can also address the fact that we have groundbreaking moments. Let's grab those, use them for what they are. This is a groundbreaking moment right now in terms of power and what's going on in America and the world.
Oh, wholeheartedly.
And redefining what power is, and the power to connect, the power to create community, the power to feel our humanness and our compassion for one another while we're still telling the story of what our business is about. So it's a win-win-win.
What I love about you, aside from dropping the fashion in on this whole thing, 2 words that I constantly hear you say and that you just resonate: power and change.
Yeah.
Power and change.
The power to change.
And that's just everything about your message.
Life is changing every second. When you have a newborn, you can really tell this child changes every single minute.
Every mom watching this can relate.
Yeah, you're working, and when I was working and modeling so much as I loved my job, I was missing those moments and those changes. So there's change going. The one thing you can count on is change all the time. So one of the things I love about the fashion industry is it gave me the ability to change quickly. If you weren't changing, you couldn't stay in the industry.
Oh my goodness.
And you had to embrace change.
It evolves so fast.
It moves so fast, and it created this skill and this kind of excitement and this understanding of how quickly this is going to change. Jump in the moment. help move that moment on to the next one.
So
And you can't
mentally
stop
got you ready for
progress.
that.
Yeah, and physically.
Physically.
Transforming yourself into whatever collection you're wearing.
Yeah.
Transforming yourself into whatever job you have in that moment. Transforming yourself into whatever character it is that you're playing. Transforming yourself from a mother to a runway model.
Yeah.
Transforming yourself from a runway model to a fashion show producer. Transforming yourself. I help a lot of women style their lives, and they're breaking through their own glass ceilings. In every industry right now, women are going through a huge transformation, and it's very exciting to see the difference that clothes can make. Clothes are such an innocent way to change someone's life, and it's a lot of power for a few yards of fabric. You have someone who's never thought of themselves as particularly beautiful, and everybody is beautiful, and I know this. And being able to see the beauty in every single person and bring that out and put that on the outside so that when they walk in the world gets to see that beauty. Since I'm in an industry where a lot of people do what I do, it seems like a lot of people know how to do fashion, but I read a data point the other day that said only 5% of people really know how to get in fashion and play with it and style. So it's like, oh, good, more work.
Oh, yeah.
More fun.
Yeah, did you hear that? Some of you
more
Instagram
transformation.
people, you're not in the fashion industry. Just kidding. Well, tell me about Model Citizen and your work at Hockaday.
Oh, well,
This is fun.
This is my endeavor to give back. So all the years in the fashion industry, all the knowledge of how fashion works, how it moves through the culture, how it changes people's lives. I wanted to introduce these skills to a younger generation. So at Hockaday, we have leadership and presentation camps, and we have fashion camps.
This is so great for these young women.
It is so great.
So great.
And women start losing. So when I was growing up, the women started losing confidence in those middle school years. About the time that kids have their hormones introduced to them, the boys come out.
Oh, yeah.
And the girls go in.
Absolutely.
So it creates this platform in life where she's going in and he's coming out. So what I do in the classroom is teach the girls to come out and express themselves and feel a kind of inner confidence. And the boys get very comfortable with walking on a runway. We talk about how do you enter a room with confidence. So 93% of all communication is nonverbal. 93% of all communication is nonverbal. So how you look, how you walk, how you stand, how you look at someone in the eye, how you communicate, all of that communication, most of it is nonverbal. So
93%.
93%. So those are the skills that we work on in the classroom at such an early age. My hope is that it becomes so grounded into their little minds that it'll never leave them. For the rest of their lives, they will walk with more confidence.
And
for the
I'm
rest
pretty
of their
sure men
lives.
know that for women it's 100%. You know when a woman's mad, it's that silent, I know that look.
Yes, important communication.
Absolutely. Well, Harriet, why do you think bringing change to people is so vital?
It's life. Change is life. Life is change. It's never going to stay the same. Your brain is, gosh, our brains, our cell tissue, we have 50 trillion cells. They're constantly are dying and being reborn every second of life. So this body, everybody's body is changing constantly. Our brains are changing constantly. Embracing change is really the greatest route to happiness. If we're resisting the change that we feel is happening around us, you have this going on. And when you can look at change and embrace it and be at peace with it and be part of that change, you're going to have a happier life.
Yeah.
You're going to have more confidence going through the world. You're going to know
Yeah.
who I am.
Yeah.
This is who I am. I'm accepting change. I'm growing. I'm constantly moving. And with the new data coming out on the brain, it's really, really important that we embrace change and create new neural pathways in our brain, which creates all kinds of openings all over our body to stay young and healthy well into our hundreds.
I like that.
Yeah.
So groundbreaking vision with Harriet. I'm taking change, power, transformation, fashion, and a whole lot of fun. That's what we're going to get with you.
Yes, beautifully said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
Well, it's
you.
been a pleasure talking to you. I
It's
could
been
talk to you
wonderful.
forever.
Thank
I love your
you.
story and your vision with everything. Join Harriet every Monday at 11 a.m. for Groundbreaking Vision.